You have tuned in to the Nightcap on Lakers Fast Break with Sean Grice and your host, Joseph B. Soro. B as in boy. I am going to start with a little bit of a Christmas cocktail. Y'all know what this is from. So good. So good. So
next year he thinks he might be guessing people's weight or working on the tilt-a-whirl.
I need those. What was it? Walnuts he was eating when he was eating or drinking?
Yeah.
Well, I had to mix that in. I was supposed to do it yesterday, but I didn't have them readily available. At least I didn't have the eggnog. But here's the nightcap for the nightcap, folks. This is probably going to be one of many tonight, and I'm also going to throw in a few shots in honor of Intel's initial hello. So top of the morning to you, top of the afternoon and evening, and we're going to have a very good night. But while we drink and have fun, we are going to discuss a little bit about the aftermath of yesterday's game and games, including a little bit of the NFL and how the two factions are now going to have to battle for the next decade or three. And to go back and review a little bit of the Lakers game, I felt pretty good going into this game as a spectator. Wasn't too concerned about anything until AD turned his ankle. And then at that point, I'm like, eek, what the hell is, dude? We didn't need this right now. We needed AD. We could probably get out of this with like a double-digit win, even though it is in San Francisco. But I'm like, God, did they have to? Did he have to miss this one? Well, it turns out that they actually played pretty good ball the rest of the way until the last minute, which seems to be the norm with this team. They can't close a door with a damn bulldozer. But the thing was, what they did do right in the end was they finally went to the basket. Now, I thought it was going to be LeBron, but I think Golden State thought that too and were surprised. I don't think they had any idea that they were going to assume Austin Reeves was going to get past Mr. Wiggins. I mean, Andrew Wiggins is a pretty athletic guy, right, Sean?
Mm-hmm.
Did you think that? I didn't think so, but in the end,
Joe, I got to be honest. I rewatched the game, and I think the basketball gods were on Austin Reeves' side after he drew that charge on Steph Curry after having just come back from a pelvic injury. You want to talk about onions? That's some onions, man.
Well, he hit those two free throws. That was nice to see because he had actually been kind of in the AD area towards the end of games at the line. So that was a good sign that he was maybe engaged a little bit in making sure that the team didn't leave points away from them. And he did have a little bit of a clutch gene here, last few years. Kind of went away because of those free throws. So maybe that was the start of something else.
And he usually averages like one triple-double a year, so he got it out of the way early.
It is. And it definitely was his game if you had to pick one, although LeBron had a pretty good game as well. I'm just going to say this one little thing, and then I'm going to go into the positive areas of the team. LeBron, right before those free throws, I don't know if you noticed it. I sure as hell noticed it. He looked like he didn't want the ball. Like it was obvious he didn't want the ball. That's not a good sign. That's not a good look. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Lakers won, battling this Steph Curry shooting from the other side of the planet, three, not being able to switch the correct way, which is something that we've discussed a little bit, but not a lot about in terms of the defense. I don't know how this can be solved in terms of switching when you're not supposed to and not switching when you're supposed to. I wanted to get into that part because we didn't really get into it in the last game. I wanted to enjoy the win and talk about more positive things, but some of the structural things with the team. I want to know from you your observation on this because I don't think it gets discussed a lot. Why do teams double team when they don't have to? Why do they switch when they don't have to? And why would they even think about switching in that moment, knowing that you risk the separation that did get created there and ended up almost costing you the game? I'm is it one of those things where it's the jump fake? You just it's an instinctual thing that you do that you're not really thinking about because of the pressure, or is it just bad mechanics, bad fundamentals? You're on mute, Sean.
Joe, that's an outstanding question. That's an outstanding question. I think it's a combination of the two, and let me tell you why. I think it's partly yes, partly it's because there's definitely a lack of fundamentals going on for sure. Because you and I remember basketball from the 90s, and usually if you couldn't hold your own on the court one on one, you were usually pulled. It was pretty quick too. Now, at times, teams did employ the zone, right? We saw that with Utah and Seattle with their blood rivalry in the 90s. I think it's a combination of teams not teams devaluing man defense, Joe, and also I'd rather give up a contested three than a two. Um, but I mean, it makes for a sloppy game, and I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, no, go ahead, finish. I thought you were done.
Yeah, no, I was also gonna say, yeah, the I think but this starts way before they get to even high school, like in AAU when they're like 12 and 13, they're just top pick and roll basketball, 1-4, like Butch McRae from Blue Chips. It's like that, like the some I'm just say it, some fucking snake sees a kid that he could squeeze enough to try and get some money out of. And it's like a Butch McRae, and you teach him, 1-on-4 rather than team basketball, which is, you know, not really affirmed much, even in college, Joe. As you see, a lot of these guys that enter the transfer portal, they usually go to teams that are either in need of a player at their position, there's NIL money involved, or it's a pro style offense.
Yeah, it's crazy how since the NBA has gone more college in terms of its rules, you have this kind of merging of games. And now that the NIL is a part of our lives, we're getting slowly to that part where we're getting I don't know necessarily if it'll be a big deal in basketball as much because they're leaving after 1 year anyways, but you're going to start to feel more of this possible minor league AAA type thing and the majors with the NBA and all that. But I don't know if it's going to be as much as it would be in football because again, these guys are only playing 6 months and then they're out. And the energy, because this team is young, should not be a problem. They should not be tired playing 30 to 35 minutes. So I'm not going to sit on that. Well, they're tired, and because fatigue makes cowards of us all. But this is not LeBron handling the ball the first 3 quarters, and then all of a sudden you can see that he's withering down. That makes a little more sense after 50 years of playing basketball. I'm factoring in the playoff games too. And then of course AD big sometimes might have a little bit of space there too, because if they're getting beat up for 35 to 40 minutes during the game, there might be some fatigue there that no matter how in shape you are, is going to take its toll, especially if you're not someone who's mentally relentless. So Shaquille O'Neal, I never felt like he ever looked tired at the end of games. I don't think I have a memory of it, but I think what he did do is he did take 15 games off during the year and kind of made up for it there and didn't go as hard as he wanted to probably, or as he chose to not do in practice. And it's weird because I kind of get that. See, we have rules, and this is where this thing gets muddled. We have rules. We have this, you play hard and you do well and you always give it 110% and all this, all this stuff, right? But in life, there's exceptions. Much like, and you'll like this story, and I think you've heard this. You remember Jimmy Johnson when he coached the Dallas Cowboys? Well, he was actually famous for this particular scenario where one of his fourth string guys ended up falling asleep during filming. Mm-hmm. And he ended up going to him and cutting him. And of course, the media got a hold of it and tried to turn it around on him, right? And people don't know this, but Jimmy Johnson was a psychology major. So he knew the game of psychology. And to put a button on this, they said, well, coach, what if Troy Aikman fell asleep during film? And he goes, I'd walk over there, tap on his shoulder and go, Troy, you fell asleep. So what that did, because it reminded me of it also reminded me of a story of Robert Horry being asked, well, who's better? Who do you like better, Greg Popovich or Phil Jackson? And I knew before that question ended who the answer was. I knew it because if you know Robert Horry, we love Robert Horry. We love Robert Horry. Laker Nation, Laker fans, we love Robert Horry. There's never not one thing negative on Robert Horry. So this isn't anything towards that. This is I love Horry. And the second he got asked that question, I'm like, it's Popovich by a mile, because it was known that Phil did not necessarily, what's the right word to use here? He didn't really appreciate Robert Horry's game.
Because they were from two different worlds. Phil was this free-spirited Zen Buddhist, and Robert Horry came from a very militant household. So his mindset was very. It's amazing, Joe, that both disciplined as hell, yet it was like two rams butting heads.
Well, I think it's funny that you mentioned that, because while their discipline was different, they actually had a lot in common in that their fathers were both preachers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, here's my theory on why Phil Jackson didn't like Robert
By
Horry.
the way, shout out Robert Horry, University of Alabama.
Tip the hat off to Mr. Horry. I believe the reason why Phil did not appreciate Horry until he came to the Lakers was, I think he saw that Robert Horry was a very talented player that didn't use all his powers. And that probably frustrated Phil Jackson a lot, because here you are, a 6'10", jumping out the building, arguably could have won the 95 Finals MVP. He was never going to win it. Obviously, Hakeem was going to win it. But the point was, he played so amazing in that series. Like that was his capability. And, it played out that way. And Phil always has to have a whooping boy. It's just one of those things where,
the Lakers the Lakers offered him a starting role, which is what he wanted.
So going back to my point is there's this psychology of sports that the talent sometimes has to outweigh certain discipline,
Mm-hmm.
and it's how do you work around it? How do you work around it? The difference between Greg Popovich and Phil Jackson, the reason why there was space there was because Greg Popovich coached one of the most coachable mega stars that's ever played sports. He's essentially Tom Brady of basketball, or Tom Brady is Tim Duncan of football, where Popovich could yell at Tim Duncan and give him the riot act in practice, and everyone had to get in line. Same thing with Belichick with Brady. He'd get on him, everyone had to get in line, right? Well, that shit didn't happen. That stuff never really happened in LA with Kareem, whether it was Westhead, whether it was Pat Riley. That shit definitely didn't happen in Chicago when Phil was there, and definitely not I mean, I guess he did kind of get mad at certain players, but he still had to kind of be delicate. But in the end, it's hard to ever not be hypocritical in describing, well, you need to do this and you need to do that. That's not always 100%. Not everything is 100%. Nothing is. Even the most professional gambler is not 100%. So you have to be willing to you still though have to be able to put your willie on the table and run with what you're saying. But then if you lose, you have to be willing to get that willie smacked on the table. And that's just what it is. JY, no, I would not. My Hall of Fame is very strict in all sports. As amazing as he was at the most amazing times, he was not a star. He was not a all-star, megastar, someone you were afraid of during a career. He was definitely scary at the end of games, but he wasn't that guy that I could say, hey, you can build a team around and win championships. He was a complimentary player.
But he was also. But see, here's the thing, though, Joe. It's true he was a complimentary player, but he was also specialist because he played exceptionally well in the playoffs. That's rare. It's rare you see a guy's numbers actually go up in the playoffs. There are rare exceptions with superstar. Magic's numbers go up. Jordan's numbers go up a tick, but not as much as Magic's percentage-wise. But Robert Horry, Rondo, Jimmy Butler, these guys, peak performance in the playoffs. That's special. That's a specialist. It's rare.
Yes. In Search, this is for you, baby. This is for the Diddy comment. Crown Royal doesn't go down smooth. Top of the morning to you. Anyways, yeah. I get it. Derek Fisher had that as well, but I just can't. I can't roll with Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame is supposed to be the elite of the elite, and I know that the Hall of Fames lately have been, I don't know, kind of venturing into the very good areas, and I'm not gonna bow down to that. I think that the Hall of Fame belongs to those who, I always say, for me, I have to be deathly afraid of that player. I have to be deathly afraid of that player when you're playing against them. That is true greatness. If you're worried about that player, you're likely one of the best in the league, if not the best, and that's something that's just rare. However, the Hall of Fame is a business, and I totally understand kind of how this rolls. Is this just in?
This was posted about 11 hours ago, Joe. From
My
Sean.
sources in that Lakers front office tell me they're open to moving that. Let's see, was this verbal typing? First, 3 first-round picks and a potential trade, but it has to be for a player or players that they feel can get into this iteration of this team now and grow for the next 3 to 5 years.
That's very specific, Joe. Usually when when sources get leaked, it's usually very vague and boilerplate as far as language is concerned. But that one says you're willing to give up everything in the cupboard for the right player that you can insert now and win now and build around in the future. There's only like 3 guys in the NBA that you could think of right now, Joe.
Okay, let's dissect this post. First of all, I don't know what happened with his grammar. That he should have edited that. That was horrible. We've said this without the details. If they're going to trade for someone, it has to be a bona fide third star.
100%.
That third star is not going anywhere for a while.
100%.
Now, I didn't say that part. I was just thinking this year because it's not likely that LeBron is going to play beyond next year. I just don't see how that's going to work. So we've dissected this to its head. How is a third star possible in LA using the assets they have, and who is going to throw that star to LA? It's very difficult. I have no idea. Believe me, you can't. I'm not thinking about someone like who? Definitely not Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is not that guy. Levine is definitely not that guy.
There's really only 3 guys
who
fit that mold. There's really only 3 guys. One is De'Aaron Fox.
Okay.
The second is LaMelo Ball.
Okay.
And if you had to put a third in there, you're likely looking at somebody like
See, it is hard.
You'd have to find somebody who's disgruntled, because those are the only 2 guys, right? Unless you want to go veteran, but that post right there says that the front office is willing to trade those 3 first-round picks for the right player you could build around with AD for 3 to 5 years.
Is that going to be enough to get Trae Young? No, because especially with the way he's playing right now. And their game tonight, by the way?
No. And they don't care whether they're in the play-in or not. So
do the Pacers do something?
If you could see, if you offered the Indiana Pacers 3 first-round picks and a haul for Tyrese Halliburton, that's the guy.
Right?
That's the guy. You offer 3 first-round picks to the Pacers for Tyrese Halliburton.
They're not doing that. There's no head. Pritchard and that group hate the Lakers. There's no way they're going to make a deal. That's not going to happen.
I know you always say that, but eventually somebody's going to pull the pin.
True. But why? Okay, let's work off Halliburton. Why are they trading Halliburton at that point? Aren't they supposed to build something with this guy? They traded Sabonis for him. Are they just going to lose him for another rebuild?
Well, if you're looking at their season right now, and we'll go to the standings.
Right now, they're 15 and 16.
Yeah, they're a fledgling 500 team.
Right.
Like they're basically scratching and clawing to get their way into the play-in too. Like this is again another play-in. Like Joe, this team isn't that far removed from kicking the New York Knicks' ass in the playoffs and going to the Eastern Conference Finals and playing the Boston Celtics. Now you got your ass kicked there, and that's kind of where this all started. Me personally, like, do you remember? Do you remember when so I think Rick Carlisle lost that locker room, Joe.
Yeah, I could
And
probably see that.
and let me tell you when and where he did. Do you remember they were down 2-0 and they were up game 3 and he made an excuse about not playing Pascal Siakam more than 30 minutes because I guess he had spent the previous night out at a club.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when he lost the locker room.
And it's easy for someone like Carlisle to lose a locker room because he is strict. He is very old school. And it takes a certain team to kind of absorb Carlisle.
You gotta have the right vets to
You have to
talk
have
to
right
these
vets.
young
Correct.
guys.
I think there's one name that you have in there that you can say there's a chance of disgruntlement and the fact that the team is absolutely in the tank. And that is another Ball, Mr. LaMelo Ball. That name was not on my thoughts until you just said it, and I just went in and saw some things. I'm like, Charlotte. Why would they want to make that deal though?
Because historically, that's what they have to do. They're a repeat, reuse, recycle organization, Joe. Think about it. Who are you remember their like 4 or 5 best early draft picks?
They're early.
Rex Chapman. I didn't get a second contract in Charlotte. J.R. Reed, right? I believe J.R. Reed. J.R. Reed didn't even get a second contract in Charlotte because they traded him.
Mm-hmm.
Alonzo Mourning didn't even last his rookie deal before he booked it to Miami. They've now they became another they moved became the Bobcats, but again they had to give up Gerald Wallace. They've had to give up a lot of their premier franchise players over the years, Joe.
Well, let's put it this way. I think that's the only trade that makes sense if you're talking about 3 firsts. Because now you have a third star who can score at will. Now, I don't see him being the 1 or 1A to AD if LeBron leaves, but if LeBron has enough in the tank this year and you bring in LaMelo, there is something interesting there.
Mm-hmm.
But LaMelo's going to have to demand to get out. Is that right or no? Is he going to have to say, I want out of Charlotte? And who out there, let's start backwards on this. Who out there would really go, ooh, we are a LaMelo Ball away from possibly contending?
Houston.
Okay. But Houston's already contending. Do they want to mess up chemistry at the deadline?
I think if you brought in, if you bring in Ball, you can basically use Van Fleet's contract. So you're trading some shooting and I mean, his defense isn't great anymore. It's passable. So you're trading a little less defense, a little less shooting, but you're gaining playmaking and electric play in transition.
I think that's it, Sean. I think LaMelo's the guy. I think that's really the only guy that checks all those boxes you said.
It
And
looks like it, Joe.
what Shams is insinuating here, I think that's the guy. There's no other guy. No other guy that has a third star capability is either going to be disgruntled probably or not at least in the hunt somewhere. The only player right now that I can think of that has superstar potential, who's viable, who's somebody what did we say? Someone who can score. He covers all of it.
And Joe, John was speaking on playback, and he told a really interesting story about how he saw LaMelo's high school team play, and it was like men against boys with him on the court against the other five guys out there. So obviously this is a guy like it's not just like the Ball name. Like they're used to winning, right? It's not as if they were half-assed or mediocre. They are used to winning. So eventually that eats at you, man. You've said it yourself. Like losing would eat away at you more than anything else. If you're as competitive as you want to be because you made it to the highest peak there is, right? Losing, being unsuccessful, that would eat away at you more. But it's small. It'd be small. It's like small. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. I think that's why a lot of these guys don't ask for a trade earlier.
We are looking at 7 weeks from now, something that could change the fortune of a lot of things based off that scenario. And I'm really intrigued right now. There's something going on right now in my head. I'm like, we are regular folks, you in Toronto, me here in California. We're regular folks who don't get paid to do this. However, Rob Pelinka is the general manager, and for all we know, this might not even be in his thoughts. But Jesus, now that you brought it up, based on and also factoring in, I don't think Shams says that without knowing that. That is not something that leaks. And you're like, wait a minute, why did you tell him that? That's something simple to leak without any insulting an agent or insulting a player or a GM or whatever. So I will say that likely is correct and true, that the Lakers are willing to drop draft capital like that if it means to get the third guy. And the only one that fills in those boxes is LaMelo Ball. The guy's averaging 30 points a game, volume shooter, fine. We did pretty well with a volume shooter for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
That could change a lot of things. Now, here's a question for you, because we know it's not just going to be 3 picks, right? Who gets involved in that trade? And is it only LaMelo for a stack of players from LA and draft picks?
Well, you'd likely be so. With his deal, you'd likely be including D'Angelo Russell in the trade.
Just for that, I'm gonna have another drink. Again, Sean and Search are killing it tonight. So I'm gonna keep shooting on good stuff. That's a hell of a first shot.
With his improved play, I'm guessing you'd likely have to include Max Christie.
Okay.
And I'd be willing to give up like Christie over Connect. I I'd want to keep Connect if you're getting Ball. You try and work around that. So, Gabe Vincent, Vando, you throw in a couple seconds too. And if a third team, usually a third team like skulking around like that, Joe, it's usually a general manager is usually just trying to fill up the cupboard a little bit. Like, so Daryl Morey's been known to enter as a third team for a trade. Presti would get involved too if it was draft capital. If he could unload some if he wanted to, or gain some, depending on what he was getting back. Like, for example, did another team that's on a clearance sale is the Pelicans. Now, any deal involving the Pelicans, you probably want a shooter like Jordan Hawkins. Like that's the kind of stuff that people are going to get involved with. Like, I'm gonna snatch the diamond in the rough off your roster because he's gonna shine on mine.
So,
but that's why somebody like Mitch Kupchak, Joe, took chances when he traded when he was just looking to unload Vlad Rad's contract, but he got Adam Morrison and Shannon Brown back.
Mm-hmm.
Now they both have 2 titles, but Shannon Brown was more contributed more in both than Ammo did.
What Shannon did was
that was a diamond in the rough.
He was a player. How do I compare him to a current player during, let's say, the title team? Who could we compare him to? Was he the
He was more like a little more athletic, a little less defensive prowess of Alex Caruso.
He was never integral, but he was an enthusiastic player.
He was a great backup for Kobe. He could spell Kobe for 20 minutes a game.
Perfect. That's it. There you go.
Whereas Vujovic couldn't, and he eventually.
Yeah. Sasha couldn't because his head was up his rear end half the time, and
I think he got it. I think he got too attached to that contract, Joe.
Most do, don't they? Most do. Most money changes people in so many ways and it's not always because they're spending money or they're comfortable. It's more of you spend yourself so much because all you're hearing that whole time is you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this to get this. When that stops, then it's almost like you lose your training partner in the gym. It's always easier. I prefer to work out by myself no matter what. But the reality is you're always going to have a better workout with a trainer or a workout partner. My cousin asked me to come do shoulders with him last week. And I said, hell yeah, I need you to really push me on this because ever since I reconstructed this thing, I haven't really put a lot of effort in it. And it's been a decade now. It's fine. But I said, I haven't had anybody really push me. And man, my shoulders were just on fire for 3 days. And other than day 2, it was great. Just because I was just walking around. I felt like this the whole time, right? So yeah, the motivation to get to that spot changes people. That's why we've been having a lot of discussions about certain players in baseball, because that's where it's the norm of that is typical in baseball, but it happens a lot in basketball too. Not a lot really in football because there's no guaranteed contract, so you still have to kind of play. But Eric Dampier is always my example of a guy that killed himself to try to get a contract, and then he turned to complete and utter trash after that. It happens. It happens because the motivation's gone. It's guaranteed money. It's always easier to lose focus when you're not self-motivating. And that's just what that is.
Well, oh my God, Joe! Since you brought up the name, you were talking about how Shaq never looked like he got tired. That's true, but there were a few guys who tired him out. Like I remember Derek Coleman could tire him out. Now he'd be fine. He'd just need a blow for a timeout, but he'd be fine. But like there were certain guys, like for some reason, the Lakers in particular and Shaq had a problem with Big Country Reeves, Bryant Reeves. For some reason, Bryant Reeves always played well against Shaq, whether he was with the Magic or the Lakers.
The only time I saw Shaq
And Sean Kemp, I like Sean Kemp was that was a different matchup for those two. They got up for one another.
The only time I saw Shaq neutralized was in that Portland series in 2000. They neutralized him. They had enough bigs to put on him and really took him to work, and were able to at least maintain not a crazy Shaq. The Kings also sort of had him, but not really. He still was able to get the ball deep in the post and do damage. But what they did was they made him have to play pick and roll, which at that time, you got Shaq in a pick and roll, you had him on skates going backwards. And I'm sorry that I have to say this to my Laker fans. And unfortunately, this could have been a problem in today's game, even though they don't really run a lot of pick and rolls. At least that's what you think they don't. It's just they shoot threes to kind of ruin it. But if Shaq played in this era, he'd have a lot of problems on defense.
Well, Joe, let me ask you a question. In this era, if Shaq punched Brad Miller, would he be suspended for, I don't know, about 20, 25 games?
It didn't land, though. Now, he did hit someone in Orlando. I can't remember who it was. That would have warranted probably 5-10 because he hit him right in the neck. And, of course, he missed Barkley as well. So that whole little scrum would have probably been a one-game suspension, if that. Shaq in two of his 3 fights that I remember, the one in Orlando, the Brad Miller
like you'll remember, Joe, Kermit Washington breaking Rudy Tomjanovich's face and what, like you saw the punch. He would have probably broken Brad Miller's face. That was the only time I saw Shaq angry.
If you watch
angry.
If you watch that play before he threw the punch, you could understand why Shaq wanted to take his head off. Brad was a bee in that sequence. He was doing, and it was kind of like a low key Lambeer type thing that he just got tired of it. If he had hit Brad, I'm trying to think if he would have. See, he couldn't punch him because I'm almost certain the reason why he punched him the way he did is because he didn't want to break his hand.
And he was on the ground too, so
he wasn't on the ground in that one. That one he was standing up. I remember that punch vividly.
Oh, that one, yes.
I've had that happen in a fight. I've had that where I was so pissed off, I'm coming this way, and then I'm like, oh shit, I don't want to break my hand, and you hit him right here with this.
You sideswipe, yeah.
Right. It wasn't until years later that I saw Bones Jones use his elbow. And had I known about Bones Jones' elbow in high school and college, I would have totally taken that class to learn how to hit with the elbow. So it's Shaq, even in his most anger, was still thinking at that moment. And when you think when you think in anything, you're always going to be off. If you're thinking about shooting a bullseye, you're going to not usually shoot the bullseye, right? Oh, you're thinking about, am I squeezing or am I pulling, right?
Well,
You gotta be
they
instinct.
yeah, they did suspend him for 3 games.
For that punch in Orlando? Or was it the Brad Miller one?
It was a Brad Miller one, yeah,
Okay.
because like if you don't forget, Joe, that not only was Brad Miller there, but Charles Oakley also played for the Bulls and was egging him on the whole fourth quarter.
Mhm. The one that he had in Orlando was to Alvin Robertson. He got ejected and was fined $10,000. He didn't get at that time. They were still kind of not soft, so he didn't get suspended.
See, Alvin Robertson didn't talk a lot, so that one's interesting.
He was pissed at that one. That one I remember too.
If Alvin didn't have problems off the court, he would be in the Hall of Fame. Alvin Robertson is probably on the Mount Rushmore of perimeter defenders in NBA history.
Orlando Magic Shaq would have had a problem, Joe. Which Shaq? Orlando Shaq and versus. If you guys watched Shaq his first 2 years in the league, that guy looked like his athleticism was so unreal. He was the Bo Jackson of centers.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason where a human being that big should be able to move the way he did. At that time, any 7-footers usually looked like Kareem, looked like Wilt, looked like I know he wasn't 7 feet, but
lean, lanky.
They all looked lanky. Even Patrick Ewing had a little bit of muscle on, but he was lanky.
Not thick.
David Robinson was the most shredded,
best physique
I've ever seen.
Like, right? All due respect to LeBron, but like David Robinson. Was also in the Navy.
Yes.
So like,
if David Robinson had trained, let's say he ate a 10,000 calorie a day diet and lifted, he would have looked like Mr. Universe on a basketball court. He already was ripped naturally, right? But had he put on, let's say, 40 pounds of muscle in a 5-6 year span of like that kind of muscle, he would have been an Adonis on a court that no one would be able to touch. So you didn't really see, and I can't take credit for this because I saw it on a social media post, but I find it hilarious that today's player is touted as a more athletic player, right? Sean, I look at the most athletic players, and I'm looking at guys like let's say Victor. I know he's really, really good. Don't get me wrong, but his physique doesn't necessarily make you go whoa, right? Chet Holmgren, somebody like LaMelo Ball. Again, really good basketball players, but when you look at and then let's go back to the 90s. You had guys like Karl Malone. You had guys like Tim Hardaway. These guys looked like muscle-bound, just Adonises. What makes you think that those guys couldn't compete with the guys today? Those guys were great basketball players with bigger physiques, more muscle. What was it about the 90s, Sean? How come all the bodybuilders in the 90s were built like statues? And then you look at the pros now, they have more resources, they have better drugs, they have better training regimens, they have better recovery mechanisms. Like, how the hell did those guys in the 90s look so much better and symmetrical than they do now?
It's a great question, Joe. Another great question. Let's face it, when it comes to genetics and what you put into your body, now we're getting into a real crapshoot situation. However, if you're just hitting the iron naturally, taking normal supplements. You're not overdoing the creatine. I think there was just something about bulk that worked, Joe. The way you could sculpt it, the way you sculpted the bulk. I think that was kind of the difference.
Yeah, I think the discipline in this generation, just like anything else, we were just talking about how when you're not hungry, when things are easier.
Because there were like Joe. So we're talking. Let's talk about the '90s then, because this is really interesting. So outside of Michael Jordan, Joe, I would argue the three best perimeter defenders in the '90s was Mitch Richmond, Joe Dumars, and Bobby Phills, and they were all built like linebackers, Joe. And Michael Jordan mentions those three guys when he talks about the toughest defenders he's faced in his career because they were just built like football players. Like they could match his physicality, they could match his quickness. They weren't intimidated by him in the post. They could get low, and they were like, especially Bobby Phills and Mitch Richmond in the post, Joe. Those guys were really strong perimeter defenders. Like I know Mitch caught a seat on the bench for the last title, but good for him for getting one on the way out. But in his prime, like he was a problem.
And even Jordan had noted that Mitch Richmond in a lot of ways was, I don't necessarily believe in it. I think he was just being complimentary. He said he was essentially Jordan without the defense, but I don't know if I would go that far. Mitch Richmond was very good, and he was unassuming. He was quiet. He was respectful.
And the ironic thing about Joe Dumars is all of Joe Dumars' brothers got football scholarships, except for Joe. But Joe, like he played like a linebacker against Jordan, though. Joe, he played bigger than he really was against Jordan. I'm not sure what it was. If he just got more juice, and that just amplified it, playing the greatest player of all. Like I'm not sure what it was, but his defense on Jordan was some of the best I've ever seen.
I think Joe Dumars' mentality, his cerebralness, was what really, really took him to another level. Imagine this: you're playing with a bunch of freaking junkyard dogs,
goons,
right? And you're the one guy. Now, Isaiah hit it with a smile, but he was one of those goons. He just happened to be the most talented player on the team. But Joe Dumars was the mechanic of this junkyard. And he knew his dogs were crazy and nuts, and he enabled them to do what he did. And he was just the guy going, hey, I'm just trying to protect my shop. You know what I mean? And if somebody came in, hey, it's okay, guys. I'm shake your hand. Like no one talks about the fact that Joe Dumars shook everyone's hand after the sweep against the Pistons in 1991. No one talks about that because all they want to talk about is Isaiah Thomas hiding behind Lambeer to get out of the court. But which I think the story is. I think they keep this story going because it makes things relevant still. Remembering that it's a pretty good memory at that time. It wasn't that big of a deal. Like they didn't make a lot of the shit that you hear now became more popular later. When I was watching the Fab Five in Michigan, no one was crying and whining about, oh, their shorts were too short or they're too hip hop. I never heard that. During that time. I just didn't. It would have been something I would have remembered. But it's funny how sometimes they embellish these stories and they kind of take it over the top for entertainment purposes. A good example, and this is an example you can't really get around on because I visited this area frequently. Do you remember that show Gangland?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was on the History Channel. They were talking about a specific area in San Diego called Logan Heights.
Yes,
And the way
Logan Heights.
they
Yeah.
were talking about Logan Heights being this place you don't want to be there at night. You don't want to be there in the evening. You don't want to be blah, 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 blah. Dude, I hung out at Logan Heights a dozen times. Okay, there wasn't one incident in Logan Heights. I lived in San Diego for 13 years. Not one damn incident in Logan Heights.
What is it? Just what was it, Joe? Reputation?
It's I'm telling you, a lot. The quote I heard this year, it's the quote of the year for me. 85% of the shit that you hear is not happening. And I started thinking, man, that's so true. It is true. It is very true. We're so easily manipulated. We are. We watch basketball game in and game out. We can control that a little bit because we're watching it. So that one you can't really get over on anybody if they're watching. Same thing with baseball. Baseball, I've had to talk about certain instances during the year, during a series. Gavin Lux, Empire Jeff, did a show today, and people were ragging on Gavin Lux. And I've been a Gavin Lux apologist for the last freaking month and a half. Everybody's like, trade him and get somebody else. Trade him and do this. Trade him and do that. I'm like, did you motherfuckers not see what that guy did in the World Series? Were you guys fucking blind? Who do you think drew that walk after they got the first out in the bottom of the 10th? That was Gavin Lux. He got on base.
Mm-hmm.
Walks like that in pivotal games like that are huge.
Right.
Huge. It puts the pressure on the pitcher and it puts the pressure on the defense because now you got to deal with some guy running and you don't know if he's going to steal the it's a whole different ball wax, especially in a game like that. He also had the pop-up that tied the game in Game 5 right before Mookie Betts hit a pop-up to take the lead, the eventual winning run. People don't look at the details of scenarios. So Logan Heights, what are the details? What? Okay, so you had a few issues in Logan Heights a couple times. Oh, they have gang spray paint. So there's gang spray paint all over Crypto next door. It's in an entire building. It's on an entire building next to the piss that I kept smelling across the street. So I don't know about you, Sean, but if I owned an arena and I owned real estate in that area, and of course no one's gonna, if someone wants to fight back on this, they'll probably say, you'll never own land like this, and you'll never own an arena. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, Joe. You don't know what you're saying. You're not in our shoes. Do I really need to be smart and have an Ivy League degree and have billions of dollars to know that I don't want piss being the odor across the street from a building I own?
No. You do not need an Ivy
No.
League
And on that, I'm going to take a shot for myself on that one. No more piss. No more piss. Not a big fan of Crown as a shot. So, kind of veered off a little bit there, but let's answer a question by Mr. Glassford here. Dallas Mavericks star Luka Doncic will be reevaluated in 1 month after sustaining a left calf strain on Christmas Day. Sources tell ESPN. So I'm going to start out the gate with this one. Folks, this is what happens when you're not in shape. And Luka has been playing with this, not going all the way in and making sure he's in tip-top shape, and look what happens. Did you ever hear Jerry Rice ever have a calf pull? Did you ever hear about Kobe Bryant having a calf pull? How about Tim Duncan? Did you ever hear of a calf pull by Tim Duncan?
Mm-mm.
No. Mr. Fundamental was always ready. That was his job. He made sure of it. Kobe, Jerry Rice. I mean, I know it's kind of hard to compare those guys to anybody because those guys were psychopaths and sociopaths when it came to their training. But this is your job. And Luka is supposed to be the MVP this year. I picked him as the MVP. It should be his. This should be his league right now. But what does he value right now? Beer and chicken wings. I'm totally guessing on the chicken wings, by the way. Whatever Slovenian slop he eats, for all I know. And if I'm Dallas, and maybe they have already talked to him, maybe they've already talked to him, but let's just say they haven't. Let's just say they haven't. I'd be sitting down with Luka right now going, Luka, you're going to need to make a decision on whether you want to be the greatest player of your era or you want to drink beer and slap your hand. Because you know what might happen sooner than you think? Do you want to be... You're never going to be LeBron. I don't know why anybody would ever think he'd be a LeBron. That's never going to happen. Similar games to certain areas, but never LeBron. But let's just say he's a notch below LeBron, which is pretty damn amazing. You want to be that at its peak, or do you want to be Darren Williams? Darren Williams was recently interviewed, and they asked, Darren, you look great. You look like you could still play. And he was very honest and forthright. He said, my knees would fall off. I'm paraphrasing, of course. He goes, my knees are done. There's no way I could do anything right now. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that, and I know some of it is some bodies are not meant to play in the NBA, but I don't think that's what it was with Darren Williams. Darren Williams was pretty damn good for a while. But I think what he did was he didn't do enough to prepare himself to play longer. Tracy McGrady was another one that didn't do that either. Tracy McGrady is what Kobe would have been with no work ethic. Maybe he would have been Vince Carter. Because I think he was a little bit more stout versus long. But that's the training work. The training matters, folks. What you put in your body matters.
And there's a big Joe. There is you ask any physical therapist, you ask any fitness trainer worth their salt, they'll tell you that there is a big difference between stamina and endurance. Luka has stamina, strong stamina. Guess what? A lot of athletes do. But the one attribute that a lot of athletes dip the longer competition goes, Joe, is endurance. Survival of the fittest. That's what that phrase is for. It's endurance. Can you consistently maintain your intensity with your muscles for a longer period of time than most? And a lot of guys understood that eventually you got to do that, Joe.
Yes.
Michael Jordan didn't start lifting weights until he was 30, but he said he understood the difference between well, he didn't say stamina and endurance, but it was that's basically what he was talking about.
Well, what he was doing when he started lifting and when he was 30 was he finally had, it was actually when he was 28, the year he started
30.
It was actually the year. Yeah, it was the year he lost to Detroit in Game 7 in 1990.
90, yeah.
Right, and he lost to them, and finally had realized I need to put a little bit more meat on to absorb a lot more of these hits. Folks, there's a reason why the divisions in the highest of the highest of sports, like let's use boxing as an example. There's a reason why. I know this is weird to think of this, and I know a lot of these guys gain weight after the weigh-in, but a lot of those guys end up hurting themselves when they're like this. One of the attributes that I always respected about Floyd Mayweather, besides the fact that he was the greatest defensive fighter that ever lived, sorry, Pernell Whitaker, the guy went 50-0, was the fact that he never went up and down and up and down. And that stuff takes a toll on your body in a sport that already wrecks you. If you don't think that Floyd was wrecked in the end, you don't know what combat sport is. Okay, it doesn't matter if he didn't get hit a lot. He's getting hit. He just didn't get hit a lot.
Like there's a reason why Mikal Bridges is the Iron Man of the NBA right now. He is able to be the most durable athlete the NBA has seen in a long time. The Iron Man. He doesn't miss games. Now, are you gonna tell me there's Sean, Luka Doncic has a different body type, Mikal Bridges is an ectomorph. Luka's more of a mesomorph. He's in between. He's not fat. He's not skinny. But that being said, though, if you're going to play that way in the NBA, you're going to have to be really effective in short bursts because you're not going to have the endurance. Joe, we saw with Boris Dio, one of the big reasons Boris Dio was able to bother Chris Bosh so much in the NBA Finals was that he used his physicality and his body to his advantage when he faced him up. And when he backed him down, he was able to use that big ass of his and push him down. Barkley could do the same thing. Luka doesn't do that, Joe. He doesn't go into the post. He doesn't take a break from the perimeter. So it's this up and down game that this guy keeps playing, and the same thing always happens. He just he can't squeeze any more juice out of that orange. And I'll ask this question: who do you think wins an MVP first, Joe? Wemby or Doncic? Because you have to play 75 games to win an MVP.
It looks like it's done for Doncic this year. So my prediction is going to be wrong. It's looking like if Jokic does not get hurt and plays 75 plus games, he's going to win another MVP. Now, Wembanyama is going to win Defensive Player of the Year. It's looking like that's already going to happen. The thing is with Victor is, and I'm going to connect this with what I've heard recently today, as soon as today, is that there is some discussion of LaMelo going to San Antonio. Now, that has been around here for a few months, but it's starting to pick up a little bit more steam now. Why would Charlotte make that move? And do you think that if they did make that move and sent LaMelo to to San Antonio, does this now make them a contender in the West? Or is it too soon? It's probably too soon, maybe next year. But
it's too soon. They're definitely a top 6 team. Like they ascend a little bit. I'm not willing to call them a contender, but you're a solid playoff team if you make that trade. To be continued. That being said, Joe, I'm not sure why Charlotte would do that. I'm not sure why they would do that because you'd be instantly making San Antonio better. And yeah, you'd be one of the worst teams in the NBA. Like you'd be essentially stockpiling your own picks for probably the next couple of years. The Spurs picks would be in the 20s. I mean, I guess you could argue that the Lakers picks would be in the 20s too. But I would get the sense, Joe, that if you were going to trade for LaMelo Ball, are you willing to put protections on those picks or not? Because here's what I think. I think that it'd be easier to make a trade with Charlotte if you didn't have any protections on those picks. Whereas if you had those conditions, your offer wouldn't be as strong. To quote Will Wade, strong ass offer.
you would have to.
Because you'd be giving away a lot to Charlotte too.
There's no way all those would be unprotected. You'd have to get someone like Giannis to do that. But that is crazy.
Hmm.
That's a if LeBron was 3 years younger, I'd say hell yeah in a minute. But you'd still need Giannis and a Giannis type player in that deal. I could not give 3 unprotected. Now, I still haven't been able to find the information out there is very hard. That's why the CBA is so difficult to get a hold of and see what a lot of them. I would need Larry Kuhn to come to my house and show me everything. That's pretty much right. But
if corrupt blows up, you might be able to arrange that, Joe.
If corrupt gets to generational status, our show will be enough of a web to get the people we want because we'll be able to bring them in and ask them the questions and go. I mean, I'd have a 6-hour CBA question and answer show.
That's one of the first guys I'd love to have on the show.
And yeah, I think I can probably maybe get a hold of him. He's in a couple of the forums I'm in, so maybe I might see if I could maybe get him on if he's not too busy. But the Lakers have 7 weeks to essentially tell their fan base the future of the team for the next decade. I think that's where they're going to be standing. And I say the decade instead of the next 5 years because what they don't do now continues to not move forward to something else. And in basketball years, if you don't do something a year or two before, it's too late. You almost lose half a decade in prep.
Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 years. Yeah, Joe.
So if you don't do anything at the deadline, I'm going to just assume that you're going to play out the LeBron thing. LeBron's going to come back for 1 more year to get his flowers for retirement. And then you will have basically set your team back. And the fact that the value of the other guy you have is going to continue to diminish. AD does not age like a regular player. He ages like a big who has injury issues. And injury issues as in there's always something going on. He might not be out for the year. He might not be out for half the year, like a Joel Embiid or whatever. But it's enough to where the chemistry and the break affects the team's results in the end. It didn't happen last year so much. Last year was a combination of bad coaching, not enough talent, and bad luck running into the one team that you can't seem to solve. But right now, you don't have bad coaching. You have some guys that are young that are actually playing a little better. And LeBron is still doing LeBron things. So it's an interesting. It's weird, man. You used to be able to predict basketball. It's starting to become difficult now. Mm-hmm. It really is. It's starting to become difficult. I don't know. I don't know how to. I don't know how. I don't know what to do. Like it was easier to know. Oh, we know they can make this deal. Well, 90% of those deals are gone. You can't make those deals anymore due to the restrictions of the CBA.
Like Joe, there are a few teams that have some decisions to make over the next couple of weeks. The Kings lost again tonight, Joe. 114-113 to the Pistons. That's the 5th loss in a row. They've 18 losses now, Joe. If you're trying to look up in the Western Conference, good luck. Good luck. Because you still have to play those teams in your conference. You still have to play them. You're not going to win every one of your conference games. So they're going to have to make a decision here, Joe. That we know the Pelicans are up for sale, except for 3 guys.
Mhm.
We know that the Utah Jazz are up for sale. Everything must go on the Utah Jazz's front lawn. In the Eastern Conference, you got Charlotte, Washington, and just those 2 right now, because everybody else is kind of still alive there. Even the Raptors are playing terribly. So you essentially have 5 or 6 teams right now currently, because Nick was saying about 20 NBA teams are within 2 games of a play-in or playoff spot position. So here we go. We're diluting the trade market again significantly. And it's not just it's this one is more economics than anything else.
So let's talk about Sacramento. Sacramento is they have DeRozan, who hasn't worked out. They have their star player who has not signed an extension. The only star that I've seen not sign an extension with his drafted team within the last few years. We know he wants to get out of Sacramento. I don't think that's something that's being hidden there. Who is going to want DeRozan? Where could he go where he could be effective? And then the other question is Sabonis on the table? Are they really going to clear everything out?
It's a great question because
he's making 40 mil, and then his continuously goes up. Do they want that contract for the next 5 years for not competing? I don't know. Sacramento, I think the first thing Sacramento is going to do is they're going to fire Mike Brown. That's going to happen first, and then after that, they have 7 weeks to figure out if they want to fire Sill. I think DeRozan for sure would get. I think I could see him getting traded. I could also see them not trading De'Aaron Fox until next year if they don't get the right deal. Like, they'd have to get the right deal to trade Fox. He has 1 more year on his contract. They don't have to trade him right now. But I know for sure they'll have to trade him at the deadline by next year if this is something that continues.
Joe, they might trade him in the summertime. You never know.
That could happen.
Normally a team like that, if we're gonna seriously talk about this, I don't want to acquire De'Aaron Fox at the trade deadline. We can negotiate a trade, but I want him in training camp so he can get completely immersed in my system and imbibe all that's going on, rather than try and bring him in halfway through and we try and pick it up before the playoffs. That's tricky. It's tricky. You know, Joe. Only a couple of trades here and there have ever really sparked something like that. Obviously, Clyde to the Rockets. Then there was Sheed being traded to the Pistons, and Powell being traded to the Lakers. But they're few and far between. Normally, these big ones are consummated in the offseason. And I just posted an article from CBS Sports about Fox for you, Joe.
See, so Fox and LaMelo, I would be very, very comfortable in saying that at some point, San Antonio has to make a move to help Victor get to that next level. And Fox or LaMelo are perfect complements to someone like Victor. They have to do something. So whether it's going to be a good amount of draft capital and some fillers here and there, I can see without a doubt something being done unless De'Aaron Fox wants to, which I don't think he would.
But Joe, the Spurs don't really do deals like this.
That's the thing, is they've never had a history of doing that. But here's the issue. De'Aaron Fox will want to have his bird rights with the next team so that they can sign him to a full max. I'm sure if that wasn't important, I don't know. Let's say he's so tired of being in Sacramento and maybe he sees something. Let's just use San Antonio as an example here for De'Aaron Fox, because his contract's going to be closer to going into free agent than LaMelo. LaMelo just signed an extension. So De'Aaron Fox, his contract is over at the end of 2026. He can go into full-blown free agency with no one stopping him after 2026. And San Antonio is going to have money to spend that summer. Does he look at this as, look, San Antonio, hold your horses, pun intended, hold your horses, and let me get to you. Then we don't sacrifice anything. If they trade me to Minnesota or New Orleans, who gives a shit? I'm coming to San Antonio. And I want to come to San Antonio.
The problem if that heats up, Joe, is that Houston can offer you a better deal. Because not only do they have assets that you would want, they also have draft capital. They not only have their own, they've got the Brooklyn Nets draft capital.
That's fine. That's fine. But you have to look at this from a bigger picture here.
Right. I understand what you're saying. I just that it could happen. It's not within like it. They pinch draft picks in San Antonio more than their pennies. I mean, shit. You'd really have to sweeten that kind of deal, especially with Castle being a mentor right now to CP3, Joe, at the point guard position. You'd really have that'd be a big seismic move for the Spurs to make. That's not usually in their nature.
Can Castle play with Fox?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can find a way to do it.
This has to be big picture thoughts by De'Aaron Fox. This is not going to be the financially logical way to go about this. This is how it's got to play out. If I'm a guy who wants to win, you've been in Sacramento for the last few years, you're sick of losing. Victor Wembanyama is going to be the best player on the planet in basketball, barring injury, for a good 5 to 8 years.
It's probably in about 2 years that happens.
Right? So he's going to be the number one player, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, over and over again, barring injury, for the next decade. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go somewhere where you're always going for a title? That's the decision that he already took care of one.
Well, you know something, Joe? He doesn't get to decide where he goes. There are only 2 players in the NBA that have no trade contracts.
He
One
does
is LeBron.
After 2026, though.
He can decline offers until 2020. See, a lot of people thought that a couple of things were transpiring. One is there have been 3 guys who have, it's known they wanted to somehow get to the Knicks. 1, De'Aaron Fox. 2, Zion Williamson, for obvious reasons that we don't need to get into again. And the 3 is Joel Embiid. Now, when the Knicks acquired Cat, everybody saw that as, well, that's an interesting move, except for one person. There is one person who is completely despondent about that, Joe, and that's Embiid, because he knew his chances of going to the Knicks were done. I think that has played a large part in why he doesn't want to play much this year.
Okay.
And the other is Fox. Now, the Knicks, didn't wait around. They acquired Cat, they acquired Bridges, they acquired Hart, they acquired all these guys, and they've built a team up now that they want to compete against Boston for, and it's without those three dudes, and they were able to do it. So I know that a lot of people think that Fox can't get traded to the Lakers or won't get traded, or Ball coming to the Lakers is a pipe dream. Never say never. Never say never. Especially given the climate of the situation. It'd be foolish for somebody not to trade within your division or within your conference if it's the right deal. Hell, Ballmer traded away the farm for a chance to try and win it all, and it's blown up. That can happen, Joe.
The decision making between money and winning is going to start becoming the norm in the NBA.
And Bruce Brown will not be traded to the Lakers. He's just started practice. Sorry, Joe. He just started practicing. There's no way you're going to trade for a guy for that much money, and you don't even know if he can play. Continue, Joe.
Yeah, the NBA player, and that's why I've been kind of on this a little bit. The NBA player is going to have to start paying attention to what they really want. Do you want max money, or do you want to win and make maybe a little less than the max? Whether that's one less year or maybe a little bit less in pay per year, they're going to have to start making that sacrifice if they want to win and win consistently. That's the decisions that these guys are going to have to start making. As far as going to New York, Dame Lillard was trying to get to New York for how long? At least that's what the word was. Zion was praying that he'd go to New York at draft night. Went to the worst place he could have gone. I think the only place that would have been worse was Charlotte. I actually think New Orleans is worse, at least for him. Charlotte keeps getting these first overall picks, and it's killing the NBA. By the way, I think that the NBA would be better to just get rid of the lottery, in my opinion, and let you've created a as close to a almost everyone is competing at the end of the year process. I don't think you need the lottery anymore. Let the worst team get the pick instead of having this lottery. If it's New Orleans, so be it. But I think this random shit is losing its luster now that you've pretty much watered down the NBA with its competitiveness.
Well, Joe, here, okay. Random NBA trivia question for Joseph B. Soro. Joseph, name the two teams that have the most number one overall picks in NBA franchise history.
Just so you know, I'm not looking. Two teams are tied for the most first overall picks?
Yes.
That's a good one. That's a real good one. Is one of them the Lakers?
Nope.
I got to get at least one of these. First overall pick. Houston?
Ooh, no.
Damn. I'm not going to be able to guess. It's not New Orleans, is it?
No.
I didn't think so.
Okay, so because they were so inept, it's hard to. It's
Cleveland?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Austin Carr, Brad Doherty, LeBron, Kyrie, Anthony Bennett, Andrew Wiggins. 6.
Who's the second team?
Take another guess, Joe. I'll give you a hint, okay? I'll give you a hint.
I gotta take a shot for sucking on that one.
Okay.
Cleveland. Cleveland and who else? The Clippers?
Okay, I'll give you a hint. This team has never won as a franchise more than 52 games in a season. Only once. This team has only won more than 50 games once in its entire franchise history.
It's not the Clippers?
Mm-mm. It's you're gonna think, as soon as I tell you. Come on.
Orlando.
No. It's the Wizards.
What?
Yeah. They have 6 too.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
When?
So they had the number 1 overall pick back-to-back years, 53-54. Then they had 61-62.
Are you sure that wasn't the previous Washington team that defunct?
You mean the Baltimore Bullets?
Yeah.
It's a continuation of them. Yes, they have a shared franchise history.
There was 2 of them though, Sean.
And then the last, the last 2 number 1 overall picks by the Wizards, Joe.
Yeah, Kwame and Wes Unseld?
No.
Kwame.
The shots are getting to you. Kwame and John Wall.
Oh yeah, shit, man. That was pathetic.
I read an interesting.
I gotta do another shot now. This is for sucking at trivia today. Jesus.
No. You were pretty close.
I take pride in knowing these things, and I sucked ass.
You were pretty close. Houston's 3rd. They have 5.
Oh, it's the last time I drink Crown. I don't know how people drink this shit.
It doesn't have. You don't like amaretto, Joe? With eggnog, that'd be pretty good.
The eggnog is keeping me from having the aftertaste. Thank God. Anyways, so yeah, great questions. Questions that I'm not going to ever not remember. So that's a good thing about tonight. So the Washington Wizards, a.k.a. Washington Bullets, a.k.a. Baltimore Bullets. And then Houston is 3rd with Cleveland being 1. The Cleveland thing threw me off because wasn't Cleveland an expansion team like in 67?
Yeah.
Yeah, or 70 or something like that. So, and I do remember that the Lakers took advantage of Cleveland a lot during those years and getting their first picks. I think the James Worthy pick was from Cleveland, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So again, guys, you don't only learn about current events; you learn about history here on the Lakers Fast Break, the Nightcap with Joe Soro and Sean Grice. So,
and the only reason I point that out, Joe, is because Washington's well on their way to possibly getting their 7th number 1 overall, and out of those 6 number 1s that they have, Joe, the 6, they have 0 championships between them. It was Elvin Hayes and Wes Unseld that helped them win a championship.
Wes Unseld was the 4th overall pick that year?
Yeah.
And then he won Rookie of the Year and MVP that year, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, man, I don't know who can save The Wizards. The Wizards probably. Thank you, Serge. Appreciate it. The Wizards probably need someone like Michael Jordan, much like Chicago needed in Michael Jordan. And there's a market there in DC if you have the superstar. But who? Is it Cooper Flag? Is Cooper Flag him?
I don't think so. Very
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a very good NBA player, possibly excellent, but no, not changing your franchise overnight.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm also becoming a little bit more cynical lately. We keep hearing about Wembyama is different. He's the anomaly, right? That comes in every now and then. I don't think we've ever seen an anomaly like that. Actually, it's 7'6" unicorn, right? But we heard Zion, we heard Cat, we're hearing Cooper Flag now. We heard Kyrie Irving is going to be this dynamo, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But Kyrie doesn't win unless he has help. He's never really been a one. And for me, when you look at the draft picks, and let's put things in perspective. Let's put this in perspective. I'm going to bring this up. NBA first overall picks all time. I'm gonna start reading the list, and I'm gonna read it from when I started watching basketball as a coherent young adult to an adult to back again a coherent adult. Let's see here. So 1991. Another history lesson for y'all. 1991 out of UNLV. Sean,
Mm-hmm.
you know who that was?
What year?
1991 out of UNLV.
You get Larry Johnson.
Yes, sir. Larry Johnson. Let's talk about Larry a little bit. Larry was a phenomenal player.
Oh, Joe. Sorry to interrupt because I know you. I'm not sure if you're going to mention that Larry was from the JUCO. I'm not sure if you saw that report that said that JUCO athletes now will not have to worry about 4 or 5 year eligibility. You could spend a year or two in JUCO and still have your 4 or 5 year eligibility, which is great. Go ahead. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Thanks for the super chat there, Serge. You are the man. I'm going to answer this question, then we'll get back to our discussion. So JY asked, any young guys, and this is definitely a Sean Grice question, so thank you for that, JY. Any guys, preferably wings from the Pistons, that would interest us?
They're in a play-in position, I believe, right, Joe?
Correct.
It's gonna be tough. So if they weren't in a playoff position, there are a couple of guys. Yeah, Fontecchio is one. That white, big, tall white guy, the Italian that they've got, the Italian stallion, Shimone Fontecchio. That guy's one. They picked him up from Utah. I really like him. Other than that, I don't think so because like Ron Holland is a young guy. I don't want a repeat of Malik Beasley. If they wanted to trade Cade, sure, but they're not going to trade him either. So, yeah, I guess Fontecchio, and if they really wanted to trade Jaden Ivey, I'd really like him.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Detroit is finally having some positiveness around their team. The last thing they're going to want to do is trade any of their young guys at this point. If I'm Detroit, I stay away from anything other than adding to what they have. If they want to make maybe a run to get maybe a 7 or 8 to get this thing going, because I was not very happy with Cade Cunningham's performance the first few years of his career, but he's starting to come around. And I'm going to admit that I kind of
was unfair to him on that, and
A lot of people wrote him off, Joe.
I take the hit on that one. I didn't factor in that he is playing in Detroit, that they just fired their coach not too long ago, that they had signed for a bazillion years for whatever reason. And there's a lot of turmoil when things like that are going on. Front office issues are going on. Head coach is now changed again. You're a young team. NBA is very difficult to play already. And it's doubly difficult when things around you are not consistent. They have some consistencies right now. So I have no thoughts of them doing anything to mess up what's actually starting to work right now. At least that's where I stand. I think they probably see themselves probably being what Cleveland is right now in the next few years. They're going to get more draft picks in the next few years. They're going to hopefully get some good players. They're going to really kind of start competing here as Cade Cunningham comes into his own, because ultimately that's going to be his he's going to be the guy that's going to have to lead this. Thompson, still young, still going to see what he's got, and that's kind of where that's what I see with Detroit.
So 1992, Joe, number one overall pick.
So I'm going to go back to real quick with Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson, initially that was the same year Dikembe Mutombo was drafted as well. Dikembe made the All-Star team that year and was on his way to win Rookie of the Year, but then something happened towards the end. I can't remember if it was an injury or what, and Larry Johnson ended up winning the Rookie of the Year. Talked smack accepting that award to Dikembe. I think it was all for fun. And, of course, we thought Grandmama was going to be kind of the next their games weren't similar, but he was supposed to be kind of the next Charles Barkley.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he had a really bad knee injury and still performed well in New York towards the end of the 90s, but never really became the player that he probably would have been had it not been for those injuries. So 1992, need I say more?
No.
Probably, arguably, the best first overall draft pick in that decade, Sean?
I'd say so.
I mean, by a hair above Tim Duncan?
Yes.
Okay. So Shaquille O'Neal, do we really need to explain this one?
No.
Okay, good. 93, Chris Webber.
Mm-hmm.
Much similar to Larry Johnson, minus the injury. But what Chris did that kind of set him astray is he didn't want to deal with Don Nelson in Golden State. And what was tragic about that is that first year with Golden State, I don't know if you remember this, they had an epic first round matchup with Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
It was the most entertaining sweep I've ever watched. It was the most entertaining sweep I've ever watched. Golden State was running and gunning. Crazy. Future was bright. But for some reason, the Warriors chose Don Nelson over Chris Webber. Chris Webber ended up getting traded to Washington after that. And need I say more? So, Chris Webber, much like Larry Johnson, they were there, but it didn't finish the way it probably should have. Those two should be in the Hall of Fame based off their talents, especially Chris Webber. Chris Webber's game was so team NBA oriented. It's a shame that things didn't go a little bit smoother for him. And a lot of it was his fault. A lot of it wasn't. It just kind of played out that way. And that's, again, how it goes. So the next year, Glenn Robinson.
Big dog. Wanted to up the ante on the rookie contract. He wanted more money than Larry Johnson got a few years before, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So he, like, to be honest, Big Dog is like the godfather of holdouts for the NBA.
Well, I don't. There was no discrediting him for that. I don't think anybody I remember was against him. When you have that going with other NBA players, they're like sitting there going, yeah. Give Glenn Robinson $100 million because that means Shaq's going to get 120. I guarantee you, Shaq was sitting back going, yeah. Give him 100. Give him 100.
Yeah, Glenn wanted to be the first $100 million man, but didn't happen.
No, that was, I believe it was.
Juwan.
Yes. Of all people, Juwan Howard.
Juwan Howard.
Timing matters, folks. Timing matters. So, Glenn Robinson, known for his contractual acumen, although was a pretty good player too.
Yeah.
The Milwaukee Bucks with Ray Allen ended up going to the Eastern Conference Finals. They got beat by the Sixers.
And they beat the Lakers twice.
Yes,
in 2001.
That would have been an interesting finals, but I think the Lakers would have swept them either way. But a good player, much like Larry Johnson and Chris Webber. So right now we're looking at the first 4 picks. We're not going to go through all 30 plus here, guys. I'm going to stick to the 90s. So, and we'll continue maybe on the next show. But the next one was likely probably one of the worst first overall picks in Joe Smith.
Definitely.
Joe Smith, another. He's actually more known for the Kevin McHale snafu deal.
Pains me KG was not number 1 that year.
He would have been number 1 if that scenario was just 3 years later. No one was picking a high school kid first overall. How different would the Warriors team be if they had picked
my God.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It would have been interesting. I don't know. Golden State, I don't know. We'll never know that one. Joe Smith, obviously, no bueno. Sorry, Joe. Don't mean to be mean, but it is what it is. 96, arguably the greatest draft class of all time. Mr.
Yeah.
AI
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. So what are we trying to get here, Sean? What are we trying to solve here about first overall picks?
That sometimes they're hit, sometimes they're missed, Joe.
So right now, the only one that's won championships
Shaq.
is Shaquille O'Neal.
Shaq.
So now, AI, following year, you have Tim Duncan. That's the other one. And then after that, it's Michael
Olowokandi, Elton Brand,
Kenyon Martin, Kwame Brown, Yao
Ming.
Okay. So between 1991 and 2003, there was only 3. Shaq, Duncan, LeBron. That's it. Then you had Howard picked after that, who was a secondary champion, if not 3rd or 4th. After that was Andrew Bogut, won a championship, was kind of like a 3rd or 4th guy. And then it was Andre, is it? How did you pronounce
Bargnani?
I know Bargnani, but his first name.
Andre
Bargnani. Okay. Another dud. Greg Oden, another dud. Derrick Rose started out the gate well. Didn't win anything, though. Blake Griffin didn't win anything. John Wall didn't win anything. So look at that, Sean. Look at that lineup from 2000 to 2010. Only LeBron James was the legit one out of that entire decade and 1 year.
Exactly, Joe.
That is crazy. And you could say after that, Kyrie Irving wasn't really a 1. Anthony Davis, could you say he was a 1 in 2020?
Okay.
Not really. Anthony Bennett, worst first overall pick probably in our lifetime. Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, DeAndre Ayton, Zion Williamson, Anthony Edwards, Cade Cunningham, Paolo Banchero, Victor Wembanyama, and Zachariah Richeche. Folks, honestly, if I had to give an honest assessment of this, since 1991, you have Shaquille O'Neal, Tim Duncan, LeBron James, really as your only bona fide ones that won championships. Like bona fide number ones. Number one overall picks that were bona fide, no argument, number ones in winning their championships.
Boston didn't win their championship with the number one overall pick.
Boston?
Celtics.
No.
The Denver Nuggets didn't win their championship with the number one overall pick. I don't think the Milwaukee Bucks had a number one pick overall on their team either. It doesn't necessarily equate to winning championships.
But did you think it was going to be that bad, though? That is a bad percentage.
No, that's very weak.
3? Bro, that's 33 years ago. 34 first overall picks, and you only have Shaq, Duncan, and LeBron as the bona fide number one championship player. That is a terrible percentage that I actually did not know until tonight. You all found out the same time I did. I didn't even think of it. And I'm waiting for someone to come on here and say, how can you not call Anthony Davis a number one? He's won a championship in every area.
He wasn't a number one on his team. Were you a number one on your when you were picked, and then the number one guy on your team?
You're never going to be
Tim
a number
Duncan,
one.
David. So here's the thing, Joe. As soon as the Spurs drafted Timmy, David Robinson knew he was number two. But we're not going to play it like that because Tim's they're kind of classy guys. So I'm not going to play it like I'm a number one and you're number two because that's just but he was. Tim Duncan would play center on offense because the Spurs needed his finesse down low, Joe, and he would play power. He would play power forward against quicker, not necessarily stronger, but more adept players at the power forward position with Robinson there, because you're essentially playing with two centers. As much as a lot of people want to say Tim Duncan's the greatest power forward ever, what I still think it's Karl Malone, but that's just me. I think Duncan was a hybrid. He was kind of the first hybrid that the NBA has had at the front court position. That being said, you know when you're number two and the number one steps through the door. Like you said, Shaq, TD, and LeBron. When all three of those guys walked through the door, they were the number one guy.
I got a crazier stat for you. You ready? Everybody ready?
Mm.
Only one player was picked one overall and one with the current team he got picked by. Now, I'm not counting LeBron James coming back to Cleveland. He left.
He
left. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't leave.
It'd be Tim Duncan.
Tim Duncan is the only first overall pick since 1991 to win with the team he was drafted by.
That's crazy.
That is a crazy stat. And then I'm looking at the all-time picks. You have Magic most recently. Before that, Magic as the number one, bona fide number one. I'm sorry, Hakeem, Magic.
84, yeah.
Right? Hakeem and Magic. And then you got to go back to Bill Walton, Kareem.
So we're going to the late 60s, early 70s.
You have five guys. Five.
And then
in the entire history of the NBA.
Like 75 years of drafts.
Since 1947, you've had five players who were picked first overall that won a championship as the number one guy for their drafted team.
Bill Russell was traded to the Celtics. The Celtics never drafted him.
I think he was picked 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And no matter what, guys, Kobe Bryant was drafted by the Charlotte Hornets.
Oh, wait a minute, Joe. Wait a minute. Okay. No. Never mind. You counted Kareem, right?
Yeah. He was known as Lou Alcindor at that time.
Yeah, with Milwaukee. Yeah.
And I didn't count Oscar Robertson because he wasn't number 1 when he won with Kareem, and he didn't win. He didn't win in Cincinnati, anyways. But look, it's a crazy. It really is a crazy stat, and what it's proven. So much is proven that what you think is important is not important. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that. It's not a surprise though if you're a Laker fan, because the Lakers they've made a living off of poaching other people's players. That's always been the case. They've either traded for them or they've gotten them in the free agency. That's what the Lakers have built their team on since 1975. Since they got Kareem. Well, you can say Will too. Since 68, they got Kareem. I'm sorry. Since 68, when they got Wilt, they've been able to poach him, win a championship with him. They got Kareem in a trade, won 5 championships with him. They got Shaq as a free agent. They got Paul Gasol in a trade. These are all monumental transactions, huge transactions. Crazy how this all works. 85% of the stuff you hear is never true or not what you think. You want to know when I really started opening up to that, Sean? When you told me that stat about possessions during this era of the NBA. And
really?
It was only 1 possession more since the 90s. That's nuts. I would have never, if you had come to me and said, Joe, what's your assessment on possessions now versus the 90s? I would have said, Sean, come on. These guys have like 10 possessions more a game. 1. That was the most surprising stat. All the shit that we talk about, I'm telling you guys right now, man.
Chico.
Yeah, they never lie. I'm telling you right now, it's one thing to give your opinion. Opinions are opinions. You're going to be wrong. You're going to be right. But if you're going to say something that isn't an opinion and it's a fact, you better make sure it's fact. Because Sean Grice will find out.
But no,
hold on. Darren keeps talking shit and I'm ignoring him. Hold on. Let me see what this fucking guy is saying. Hold on. Darren, what are you saying? Hold on. Let me pull your shit up here. We could have drafted Tatum and played Magic at the point. Ha ha. What is this? What kind of comment is that? Are you just pulling shit out of your ass? Yes, the Grice is right. Hold on. The Grice is right.
He's changing my name, is he?
There you go.
The Grice is right.
The Grice is right. That Kurt, you got to trademark that, man. I'm using that. So is this a shoot at the scouting department, Joe, or upper management? A lot of misses. I don't know what this is because a lot of these guys, they were the best players at that time. If you look back at when we started talking first in 1991, Larry Johnson was the best player in the country at that time. Shaq was the best. Chris Webber was the best. Glenn Robinson, what was he dropping? 30 points at Purdue, right? That was the same draft that Grant Hill and Jason Kidd were in as well. The problem with Duke players,
yeah, and Kidd still holds it against Grant Hill that he won Rookie of the Year and Kidd didn't win it unanimously.
I didn't know he did. I didn't know I never heard him talk about.
Yeah, he's held a grudge against Grant Hill ever since.
The issue at that time, a little bit, was that Duke players didn't translate well in the NBA. I bet you if it was 10 years later, I think Grant Hill goes number 1 in that draft. So 94. Hold on a second. Let me get my thing back. So looking at Joe Smith, I don't even remember who the hell was in the 95 draft. You had Jerry Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace, Kevin Garnett. If you redo that draft, it's that's an easy one, right? Garnett is 1, Rasheed is 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then after that, you had guys like Michael Finley. You had guys like Theo Ratliff. You obviously had Jerry Stackhouse, Antonio McDyess. I would say if that draft just flipped, it would have been exactly correct. You would have had Kevin Garnett 1, Rasheed Wallace 2, Jerry Stackhouse 3, Antonio McDyess at 4, and then you'd move up Michael Finley at 5, and then Theo Ratliff at 6.
This has always been the question, Joe. Yeah, this is interesting because a few minutes ago we just finished talking about how nobody was going to take KG number 1 out of high school. What about Tim Duncan, Joe? Because at any point in time, Tim Duncan could have left Wake Forest. He spent 4 years at Wake Forest. He could have been the number 1 pick in 95, 96, or 97. He decided to come out in 97. Do you think he would have gone number 1 in 95 or 96?
I don't know about 95, but for sure 96. For sure 96, because it was the big man was always going to be number 1. You would have AI obviously be in second, and everybody else would fall in line from there. But the thing with Duncan is it was still at a time where the high school player wasn't there yet. It was.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like Travis Hunter is his version of like Tim Duncan, this like transformational star who went to like a school you never would have thought he was going to.
Yeah, and it was a fortunate calculation for him to go to San Antonio at that time because he was already respected so much for staying 4 years. So you had a lot of good publicity from the NBA fan. He comes in, makes first team All-NBA his first season, and then wins a championship in year 2. And that kind of set the stage for Duncan to be the guy that made the right decisions and was the ultimate team player.
That's right. Darren Duncan won the championship in 3 different decades. Do you know who the other NBA player to do that is? Joe knows the answer, but we'll go see if Darren knows.
Darren, do you know, Mr. Smarty Pants?
Give him 5 seconds, Joe. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's John Sally.
Sally won in 89, 96, and 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, LeBron won in 3 decades too.
Technically.
No, he didn't.
No,
he didn't. Sorry.
No.
John
No.
I don't know why I thought 07 for some reason. What the hell's wrong with me?
You've had about 8 shots of Crown Royal.
Still pretty good, though. They don't go down well, but they're settling pretty well. No, Mark, Rondo only won 2 championships.
But yeah, like the history of the NBA has shown, Joe, the blueprint to winning a championship isn't necessarily building around a number 1 overall pick.
But see, I didn't know that.
I
didn't know that till tonight.
It's about building around the right player.
I did not know it was that insignificant. Think about this for a second, dude. 1 player, 5 total. In the history of the NBA is about to hit 80 years in about 3 seasons. 80 years, 77 years, where you've only had 5 first overall picks win championships as the guy on their drafted team, you're essentially saying let's work the numbers there. Look at how bad this number is. 5 divided by 77. That means you have a 6% chance of that player that you pick first overall to win a championship with. 6%?
That's really low.
That is horrid. That is a horrible percentage. And how many times have we seen second overall picks become duds in the NBA? So what is it? What is it that now is going to be tough, Sean? I'm getting to the point here.
Accumulating.
What did the NBA kill themselves with this new CBA?
A team having
Player
a dynasty. Yes.
Yeah. They dynasties is what the NBA has built their foundation with. Do you think anyone in the 80s?
It's the rock on which they built their entire.
Exactly. The greatest decade of basketball in the NBA was between 1980 and 1989.
Boston and LA played in
eight of those finals.
10 finals, including 3 against each other. And it
Yes.
should have been 5, but like that's
Right.
another story.
Right. So 8. The other was in 83 when the Sixers finally got sick and tired of losing to Boston and LA and went and got Moses Malone. It took something seismic to have that one year.
And Andrew Toney didn't get hurt and killed the Celtics, which he
Right.
normally does.
Right. And then in 89, you had the Lakers who were 11-0 going into the finals, and then both Byron Scott and Magic Johnson blew out their hamstrings, and that was the end of that. It took, again, seismic scenarios for those 2 years to not have either Boston or the Lakers win a championship.
And Joe, the last dynasty played the same team 4 straight years in a row, and people were decrying, oh well, is the NBA becoming boring with these dynasties? And it felt like it has felt like in the last, I would say, 8 years, Joe. I would say 2016, 2015, that Adam Silver has become very reactionary to
Yes.
negative publicity. Very reactionary.
He has, and what
When
I
you
don't
should probably, as in business, you need to take a step back, right, and properly reevaluate things from an objective point of view rather than being your feelings and making errors.
Right. It's a good example is my disdain for Roger Goodell and his not giving a shit about people like me because he's getting 57 ratings on Netflix feeds. Right? No one gives shits about what I say. My attack on Roger Goodell mainly is the fact that he says he cares when he doesn't. I would have more respect for him if he went on air and said, this is professional football. I know he can't do it because there's litigation issues, right? But I don't like the lie. I wish he would stop saying the words and use something else. You don't give 2 shits about player safety. You care about making money. That's fine if you care about making money. I get it. But you don't give a shit about player safety. You have teams playing 3 games in 11 days playing professional football in an era where they're faster, bigger, and more apt to get you CTE than ever before. And so, it's football. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. If you don't want to get the chance of getting hit or brain damage, go play tennis. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that I don't like about that guy and, in general, the owners that have enabled him to do this. As far as going back to Adam Silver, I've been a big Adam Silver fan. The way he handled the Donald Sterling thing was one of the more gangster moves I've seen a commissioner do.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. Everyone was sitting there playing with their nuts talking about, oh, is he going to get suspended for the year? Is he going to get fined $1 million? This motherfucker came out of nowhere and said, no, this fucker's gone. And I was just like, whoa, your mentor kept this piece of shit in business, fucked his own flagship team in the well, at least there's a new story that me and Jeff unfortunately haven't been able to talk about because Jeff's been busy. But initially he had ousted his flagship franchise and let this deal happen. That's probably what pissed me off more than anything is the fact that the Clippers got CP3. It wasn't the fact that it didn't go through all the way, but it was the fact that not only did it get vetoed, but it went to the fucking Clippers and ruined CP3's ability to win a championship. If CP3 goes to the Lakers, he's winning at least one. I feel bad for him. But anyways, so Adam Silver comes out the gates rocking and rolling. And he starts doing business a certain way where I'm like, I can see this guy and the way he carries himself. He does end the discussion with, look, at the end of the day, we're still a business and we have to run it. See? Just be honest. But COVID jacked up his career. COVID and it's actually more of the social stuff around that time as well. And he hasn't really been able to get ahead of it. And what they did is he let, I think what the reason why he's gone this route is because they wanted to guarantee that new TV contract. They all took a shit on themselves to guarantee that they're going to get this.
Go along to get along, kind of.
They had to because 76 billion is 76 billion. They're not gonna give two shits about us because they have those idiots that are at the games already taking pictures of themselves. Exactly. They don't need Sean Grice. They don't need Joe Soro. They don't need us anymore. They have those schmucks and their money and their selfies and their marketing. We're just spectators that are kind of looking out. And we care the most, but they don't give a shit. We don't make them any money. We're too busy complaining and whining about why the team sucks and how we want Genie to go out to the farm, right? What do they say when they're taking the dog to the farm?
Yep. Taking the dog to a farm.
Take the dog, to the farm, out in the country. That's it. Magic to Samson in the All-Star game. I don't remember that one, but I do remember them talking about it. No, Gerald's not coming on tonight. Gerald, I think, is taking a rest. And as of right now, I think I'm about to do the same. So I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I'm feeling pretty good, though. I'm not feeling sick at all. Thank you for being here, Sean. This was a great discussion. It kind of went somewhere where I didn't think it would go, but I'm glad it did. More information, more history, more knowledge is always a good thing. Really good nightcaps, really good questions by the crowd. Thank you all for being here tonight. We had a pretty big crowd here tonight, too. I wasn't expecting it this late, but thank you for being here. If you guys want to contact me, you can email us at LakersFastBreak@yahoo.com if you have any questions. If you want to contact me directly on Facebook, I'm known as Johnny Blade on Facebook, and my profile pic is Mr. Freddie MVP Freeman with the Statue of Liberty pose. You'll be able to DM me there if you'd like, or write on my wall. It's up to you. Although I do have it on private, so you'll have to friend me first. Or you can reach me on Instagram with SinBlades_turf. That one's more my business side of things, so please be gentle, or just PM me, say whatever you want. And then, of course, X, the pollution that is social media, but I still have a presence there. It is under my real name, which is one of the few things that have my real name, which is Joe Soro LFB. You can direct message me. You can X me. You can Twitter me, whatever it is that you like to do. Just be nice or not. I don't really care. I'll still answer the question. Okay, wait. Dylan has another question here before I head out. This will be the last question to answer for the evening. Joe, do you think the Kings will trade Fox? So we've gone full circle on today's show. Dylan, thanks for coming around. Sean, put a button on what we've already talked about, but we really didn't get this answer from you because I kind of already feel that it's not going to go this way. But the question from Dylan the Villain Brooks, will the Kings trade, if they can,
De'Aaron Fox to LA?
Long answer, no with a but. Short answer, yes with an F.
And there you have it. I'm going to say F and no way in hell. The Kings will not trade De'Aaron Fox to LA, not for anyone other than maybe Anthony Davis. That's it. That's not going to happen. Houston, San Antonio, sure. But I believe if they're smart, and I know Sacramento hasn't been known as a smart franchise in its years, at least not since Petrie was running things over there. But he or the Kings, first of all, they're going to fire Mike Brown here before they do anything. And then they're going to have to get the deal that they really, really want. They're not forced to trade Fox this year. His contract doesn't run out till next year. So they have until the next trade deadline to wait this out or get a nice deal during the summer. That's where I think that is. If there's any way the Lakers are going to get an impact player, they are going to have to go with Sean's recommendation at the beginning of the show, which I think is the only realistic check mark all the box player, which is LaMelo Ball in Charlotte. But a little bit of me says that I don't know what it's going to take to get him out of Charlotte. Would they want the one ticket selling player on their team to be traded? I don't know that answer. But if they did make that work, it would fill in all the boxes and you'd have a much better shot at competing for a title. With the way the NBA has become in terms of parity, you definitely have a better chance, especially if AD and LeBron are healthy towards the end of the year and they don't play Denver at the beginning. I think they could probably get them if everyone's healthy and LaMelo's on the team later, but please not in the first round. The Lakers would still have to get that fourth seed. They need a series at home. They have to get that. The Lakers are going to have any chance at competing this year. They have to get the 4. And looking at the standings right now, the 4 is the only shot they have right now, especially with Luka going to be out at least a month, probably 2. And then, of course, Denver's still reeling. This is the way of the world at this point. So with that, again, thank you for watching the Lakers Fast Break Nightcap with Sean Grice and Joe Soro. We should be back tomorrow with the Podfather. Sean and I, we're always floating, yes or no, but usually we're here. Until next time, we'll see you next time.